Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Meaningful People Podcast. So happy to be back here and bringing you another episode. We sat down and spoke to Rabbi Moshe Gersht, and this is some story. I guarantee you're going to love it. It's a roller coaster, so hang on. I want to let you know that Rabbi Moshe Gersht has put out an incredible book, and special for you listeners, head to the link in the description of this episode. The first 1,000 people that sign up for this email newsletter that he has are getting the book for free. Getting it for free. There's a special sponsor who said, for Meaningful People listeners, I got them. 1,000 books will be sent out, so make sure you take care of that. But an amazing guest we sat down with, and it was such a privilege. So again, Rabbi Gersht, I'll tell you, currently lives in Eretz Yisrael, but that's certainly not his life was. Complete Baal Tshuva. Talk about someone who probably, if did not become religious, may have been a international or a global rock star. His music may have been playing in cars all around the world. And you'll see him and be like, what, this guy, he had a mullet? Maybe. I'm not going to spoil the episode more than that. I want to give a big thank you to our sponsors of this episode. A big shout out to our friends at Amor Fine Jewelry. Shavuos is coming up, and you want to get something that's going to last a lot longer than cheesecake or flowers. Well, don't worry. You got Amor Fine Jewelers in the house, and they have this showroom that is stunning. You live out of town? No problem. You could do a WhatsApp video call with them. They could take you around the showroom. And I have a special offer for Meaningful People listeners. This is what you're going to do. You're going to send them a message on WhatsApp. Specifically, you send them a message on WhatsApp, and you'll get 10% off the purchase that you make. Again, Shavuos is coming up. We all know jewelry is an investment in the relationship. They've been around for 20 years. And whether you're buying something for a $10 battery repair or a $100,000 purchase, everybody gets treated with incredible service at Amor Fine Jewelry. So make sure to send them a message on WhatsApp. They have incredible service. I was blown away. I had this conversation with them. And from just the way they deal with the people that schedule video calls with them out of town to the people walking through their door and looking to make big purchases, Amor Fine Jewelry. Of course, restrictions do apply, but make sure you message them because this offer runs until Shavuos. So make sure you take advantage of this offer. Send a message on WhatsApp today. And of course, a quick word from my friends at Growtha. Well, you might be an ABA, nursing homes, home aides, whatever it might be, especially in the healthcare industry. You want to make sure that when someone Googles, hey, what's the best nursing home in Florida? What's the best nursing home in Connecticut or New Jersey? I need to get a home aide for my mother. I'm in New York. Who should I use? You want to make sure that you show up number one on those Google searches because this is sort of how people find the companies they want to use. I know I do it for a lot of things, and other people do too. I'm not that different. I'm not that crazy. A little bit, not that much. But anyways, that happens when you use growtha.com. So head to growtha.com/meaningful minute. My friends Josh, Daniel, they do incredible work. They're honestly like wizards. I've met people on the street like, oh yeah, I know Josh. I work with him for years. My business is constantly getting leads because of the work they do. That happens at growtha.com. They have this incredible magic that they do, whether it's writing hundreds of articles to make sure the SEO of your website is boosted or linking other news things to your website to get you number one. It doesn't matter. All that matters is that your company will get more leads and your company will get very busy. Head to growtha.com/meaningful people. That is growtha.com/meaningful people. So enjoy this episode. We'll give you a shout out to our friends at Swing It coming soon because I sure am loving that swing set. But for now, enjoy this episode. You are listening to the Meaningful People Podcast.
The podcast featuring our nation's most impactful, influential,
and meaningful people. Moshe Gersht, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah.
Really appreciate you coming.
Privilege.
And yeah, that's the episode.
welcome.
I feel like I was just ending the episode.
That's good.
Why didn't you start out by telling us a little bit about yourself, like where you're from, what your upbringing was like?
So I'm from Los Angeles, born and raised.
Nice.
And I was raised pretty confused. My family started coming closer to observance when I was around 8 or 9, but yet had always sent me to religious schools. So it was Parsha and Mishnah during the week, and boogie boarding on Saturday mornings at the beach. So it was confused.
I thought I was confused. That's
but it was very broad. It was like a really, really kind of broad way of growing up, and then at some point,
growing up on Broadway.
Far from Broadway, the other side. And then at some point, my family really took on its connection to Torah in a really deep way. So by the time I was in high school, it was like a very, very frum environment. But at around 13, so then I fell in love with music. Really, I'd been playing music from 5. They trained me on classical piano from like 5 to 12. And then I heard some rock song somewhere. And it was like a powerful moment for me. And I was like, this is what I want to do with my life. Like a 12-year-old. Rock music. It was, it felt like lightning kind of going through my body, like really powerful experience of, I know this is where I should go. This is what I should do. I begged my parents for a guitar for a while. I eventually got, for like a birthday present, got a electric guitar. I started a rock band, and
Naturally.
and I did that for the next 7 years. In the beginning, it looked like a nice, fun hobby. By the end of my high school, I was kicked out of yeshiva high school for being in a rock band because it was taking off.
Wow.
And
just like that.
Yeah, it was a little more than just like that. But things, I mean, over those 4 years, it started gaining traction. And
It must have been successful enough that they noticed that you're part of a rock band and they kicked you out.
yeah, I don't know if they had such a problem with the music per se, but I think it was the fact that we were playing at these big concert venues and clubs on Sunset Boulevard and things
The
like
lifestyle.
that. Yeah, well, that meant that people from the yeshivas were coming to see me at a place where they didn't want it. So, in 20 years later, I understand the decision that they made. As a 17-year-old kid, I was kind of upset. I wanted to graduate with my class. And then my family made Aliyah, and I had to make this decision if I was going to go with them and everybody else in my class to yeshiva or pursue this dream, which was working. Like the music was working. So I said, I'm going to stay in LA. We're going to go for it. And then we got signed to a record label. And things continued to take off in that direction. So our music got licensed with MTV. We were on the radio. We started doing these tours.
How old are you then?
I was like 17 to 20. Those 3 years were really when it took this kind of...
And you in the band, excuse me if I missed this, but were you like lead singer? Were you the guitarist?
Yeah, singer-songwriter.
Singer-songwriter. Okay, guitar also, or just...
Yeah, and I play guitar.
How long was your hair?
It's funny.
No, like that's...
No, it's the right question. It's the right question. My hair was really short on the sides and longer in the middle.
Oh my gosh. Sterling, insert picture here.
I'll find something from back then. I'll send it to you guys.
That's phenomenal. Wow. 17 years old, you're already getting a record deal, MTV. Like to you, you're living it. But your parents just moved to Israel?
Yeah. My parents moved to Israel. Like they were on their journey, and my father's hair got smaller up here and longer over here, and they were moving in that direction, and I just really wanted to play music. That's what spoke to me. It spoke to my soul. My parents were extremely, extremely supportive. They were really into listen to your heart. If you have creativity inside of you, share that creativity with the world. And so I went for it, and it was working. I was having a really good time.
That wasn't your song though, Listen to Your Heart, right?
No.
Okay.
How does that go, Mom?
It's that era though, right? 90s rock.
Yeah, exactly. It dropped before where I was. And
what's up? How are you doing?
Well, what would your
I went deep for that reference.
what would your hairdo be if you were in a rock band?
Oh, hairdos is not something I've ever been able to contemplate just because of the lack of
No,
hairs.
when you were younger, you'd go mullet, right? Like,
I don't know.
Yeah, if my hair weren't like so fro where it's like it grows up like that, then I would have. I liked the idea of longer hair. It didn't work for me.
Yeah.
And
I am considering now though growing it out, just like crazy.
Take your time.
Go for it.
Just like for
don't
the
make any rash decisions.
early Shabbos band is thinking going like rock.
Yeah.
In which case I'm gonna have to just grow it out.
Right. I think after
Don't let it all go.
When you get to the Omer this year, just keep going.
Yeah.
Just get rid of the razor, Momo. So get rid of it.
Close parentheses. Hard close on the parentheses.
Yeah.
At some point, one of my band members, I was close with all of them, but one of them started getting involved in drugs in a really bad way. And he started not showing up to concerts. And that's like a bad thing. When you show up with a whole group and then one of the members is missing. And after a couple instances like that, we had to take a major step back and assess whether or not we could keep him in the group.
Wow.
During that time, I'd been playing with him for almost 7 years. So he was a really close friend. And my family, again, had just moved to Israel. So I said, you know what? This was right before Pesach. I want to go and visit them, spend some time with them and like away from LA and get clarity on that. At which point, I got a phone call.
I love how kind you are, by the way. Just like evaluating whether arriving and appearing at the concerts, whether that's a prerequisite to being in the band.
Yeah, well,
I love that. You would think it's a critical step of being in the band.
Yeah,
appearing at the gigs.
It's like one of those things that you kind of need to show up to be in the band.
Everyone in the band, including our manager, the heads of the label, the PR people, everybody basically called me in a meeting one day. They were all sitting at this long table, and they said, "We've all decided that he cannot stay, but you're the head of the band, so you need to make the decision. He's your friend. He's your, So
What was the band name?
It was called In Theory.
In Theory.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it remains a theory. It's not in practice anymore.
Nice.
Very good. Was that the reason why you named it that? Because one day you...
No, before Moshe, I went by Theo, and I wanted a
Theodore?
Well, I didn't go by Theodore, but that's my
That was the
English
name,
name.
like the chipmunk?
Yeah.
Wow. So the letters of Theo can
were
be
in theory
within the word. Wow, that's cool.
Wow, that's deep.
Mama Shabal Gaiva.
Yeah. I was listening to something on the way here this morning. They're like, who's Alan from Allen Wrench? Like, who does that guy think he is to name a wrench? Like, okay, Alan, like, great wrench. What do you want to name it? Me. What? The Allen Wrench. Are you kidding me? Like,
It's amazing. It's egonious.
Egonious, it is. Sweatshirt's coming soon. Okay, so In Theory is taking off. Your parents are booking shit.
Right, and so I'm now thinking about whether or not we're going to keep it in. While I'm there, while I'm in Israel, I get a phone call that says you're getting this new booking agent when you get back. It's a big deal. Your song's going to be playing on K-Rock in LA, which was a really big deal. It was the kind of the debut of the first song on the album, and something inside of me basically made this decision where it was I should do something in pro direction of my Judaism, because it's very easy to lose something like that when you're in the rock and roll world. And it was a subtle insight. And my father was talking to me at the time about my tefillin. I wasn't wearing tefillin at the time, but of course I had them. So I decided, okay, I'm going to start wearing tefillin and, bring that into my life. And so when I got back to Los Angeles, the song was on the radio. We did get the new agent. Things were really ramping up. We were about to put out this new album. But like internally, I was also getting closer to my own personal version of Judaism. I was not like really connected to it in a deep way, but I was identified as I grew up as a Jew. I was identified as a Jew, but like there was no spiritual connection on that way. It was just more like, that's who you are. Mm-hmm. So like behind the scenes, I'm developing some deeper relationship with my Judaism. And then during that time, we had this record release party, and at the party, this guy comes over to me, and who I'm really close with, and he says, "So, how long are you going to do this for?" And I said, "Do what?" And he said, "Play music." And I said, "Do it." He said, "Play music." And I said, "I don't know what that means. What do you mean?" He said, "Like, well, how long are you going to play for?" "I don't know. I guess until we're successful, and then I'll settle down." And he said, "When's that?" I said, "When's what?" And he said, "When's success?" And he was like, I went really deep, really fast. So I said, grab another drink because you're killing my buzz. It was like ruining my night.
Then you shook your hair.
Yeah, exactly. And I went back into the rest of the loud music in the room. But I woke up the next morning, and that question really burned in me like a fever. Like, when is that? When is success? And over those
what was he trying to do? I'm so curious.
I have no idea. I have no idea. Till this day. I don't know where it came from. It felt like, I was being picked and plucked out of my life, and that was like the beginning turning point.
People.
Yeah, that's what it was. And so I thought about that a lot, and eventually came to the conclusion that you can be successful at what you do and still fail at life. And that's what made me eventually make the decision to get up and leave that and move to Jerusalem, went to yeshiva, and then fell in love with Torah. So it was this major transition from full on for nearly a decade of being involved in a rock band, having a very powerful insight of recognizing that maybe this isn't the right path for me. I wouldn't have the type of family life that I might have had. I wouldn't have had a life with purpose and direction that's connected to something higher. I don't know. I really, till this day, I feel like there was just a gift that I was given to think more about life. And so I ended up going to yeshiva, and that's where I was for about 12 years.
So you
Wow.
left the middle of like touring. You left the
I
middle.
left
of,
right before another tour with a big band that we were supposed to be touring with at the time. We had done a number of big tours. We'd opened up for some great bands. It was a lot of fun. I'm saying to this day, that was a really, really great time in my life.
Was there anybody that you needed to answer to that said, like, whether it's a record label or anyone you signed deals with, that said, okay, like you have to do this, and what was that conversation like?
Yeah, I was in breach of contract. So I found out this year, like just in the last 6 months, I reconnected with the CEO of the label who I hadn't spoken to for nearly 20 years. And he told me that they got sued, right? Like not long afterwards because I left, and they were so kind about it. I think it was like a 6-figure lawsuit that was basically because of me, and they allowed me to go and live my life. And they I don't think they had to. Like I guess if they wanted to, they could have pulled me back, which is a big, big bracha.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was heavy. The band members were really, really upset. All my friends were upset. Till this day, they don't speak to me.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, so, one of them I reconnected with recently, which is really nice. But there hasn't. I've tried to reconnect with them, and I'm open. If you're watching, I'm open. I'd love to reconnect, but I get it. I walked away, and that meant that their dreams stopped. And
Wow.
sometimes that's what it means. Chayecha kodem. Sometimes you do have to put yourself first, if that means that your life is at risk. And I felt like the whole trajectory of my life was moving one way, and this was the opportunity to see if there's something more to this reality.
Wow. I love the application of Chayecha Kodman in that context, where it's not, people misuse Chayecha Kodman, I think, to justify selfish behavior. And in the context that you just applied it, a person going down that road is dying spiritually. One's spiritual life is at risk. And to be able to know that and be aware of that within the trajectory of success down that path, and to still acknowledge that that represents spiritual death, chayecha kodman, and to be able to prioritize that is, wow, ashrecha.
Yeah, I mean, it felt like it was top down. Like I guess on some level you take credit for making the decision or going through with it. But it was clear. It was like sometimes you get clarity and you just know. And when you know, you act. And it was hard. It was very hard. And I remember the flight. I was laughing and crying on the way, right? It was like, laughter from the freedom and like crying from, like that was the end of something, like the end of something really powerful and meaningful.
It's like you mentioned you walked away, but at the same time you were walking to something. Did you know at that time what you were walking to?
No, I had no idea. I knew that I was searching for something, and I fell in love with Torah when I got to yeshiva. I went to Machon Yaakov in Har Nof, Yerushalayim, and Torah just had so much that I guess when I was a kid or when I was in high school, it just didn't hit me in that way. And because it was coming more from choice, it was going from I have to I want to. There's a different openness to what was going on the inside. So fell in love with what was being shared with me. And that went from one yeshiva to another yeshiva to many years in the mirror. I spent years by Rabbi Moshe Gersht, who is a real tzaddik.
Did you have a seat?
I did. Actually, my seat was, I sat here and he was by where Momo was. And when I told
So that's pretty close, you'd say, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's pretty close.
So when I told that to my
For
Rebbe,
anyone thinking that we're conducting this remotely,
right,
super close.
It's really close. When I told that to my Rebbe, Rabbi Beryl Gershenfeld, he said, "What do you mean? Like, how do you have that seat?" I said, "I don't know. I showed up one day, and I guess the person that was sitting there in the Zman before wasn't there, and it was open, and I sat down, and I just stayed." And
that was another lawsuit because he took someone's seat. Russia really is dealing with it.
And he told me, I was recently married at the time, and he said, "This is in the merit of your wife." He's like, "It must be." He's like, "Because there's no way that you should be able to have that zchus. That's so big, it's unbelievable."
Yeah,
And
I met someone yesterday in Penn Station. We were doing interviews we're doing someone like with Mishpacha magazine for Pesach. So we're interviewing unaffiliated Jews about how they identify with the Judaism post October 7th. So we stopped a guy. We said, "Are you Jewish?" He's like, "No, but Mazel." I'm like, "Yeah." He's like tall guy, white, like long hair. He's like, "I grew up in Rockland." I'm like, "Nice. I live somewhere near there." He's like, Shiners. I'm like, okay. Like,
I love the one word drop.
yeah, like schnitzel. He's like, actually, I go to Shiners. I'm like, for what? He's like, coffee and cookies. I'm like, what? You go to Shiners for coffee and cookies? Like, he's like, yeah. I'm like, do you like put on a kippah? He's like, no, I just walk in and get some coffee, free coffee and cookies. And like one of the rabbis said, like, my name is like Seth. And they're like, now your name is Levi. Like, that's incredible. So I don't know, remind me, like, you just took a seat. Like,
Yeah, no, like, I guess long term, I gotta go ask for slicha mechila or something.
You're good. Don't worry. You're good. You're good.
So that was great. An amazing time in my life. Really spent a long time in that world of like deep iyun and deep thinking of what Torah is. About 6 years into my journey, I went through like a kind of like a dark period where I felt very far. I just felt far from God. I felt far from my soul. And as somebody who really relied on that heart, like, I followed it in the music world, and then I followed it out of the world into the world of Torah. And then there was a point where it just felt closed. Like it felt distant. I always looked at the world in a certain way. I feel really blessed because my parents raised me to see the world with like powerful hashgacha. So synchronicity is happening everywhere, and you're paying attention to the small things that take place, and things are always working out for you, like really with a baseline assumption that life is good. And so I was always listening to intuition and seeing what was going on in my life. And at some point it just felt cut off. I didn't know what was going on.
What happened? Yeah.
Yeah. And it was like anxiety, and it was sadness, on and off of just feeling far from what I knew. And yet it wasn't the Torah. I loved what I was doing. But the moment I would pull out, like in the rest of my life, I was feeling that a lot. And I had no idea what had happened. Like it felt like a button was turned. And it was like subtle, like it was turned off. And you know how sometimes you turn off a light and it doesn't just turn off, it's like,
yeah.
Right. So it felt like over like a year or two,
Like your energy was being sapped.
there was like a dimming of energy. Exactly. And at some point, I woke up and I looked at my wife and I was like, I don't know. I just, something doesn't feel right. It's not aligned. It's not in tune. And I went to go speak to a certain Rebbe who, if I'd may have asked him if he should live a long life, but he told me that I can't share who he is in this particular story, so I can't, who's a very big person. And I sat down with him and I told him, look, I don't get it. Like, I was living one life. I left that life for this life. And what's going on? Like, I didn't understand what the disconnect is. And he looked at me and he said, I have to tell you, you got here and you had a minor lobotomy. That means a small brain transplant. And I said, what? What does that mean? He said, you got here. He said, there's two types of people in this world. And everybody's everything, but they kind of come out in different paths. He called them head, body people and heart, soul people. Some people, they like to think and act, and that's like primary for them. He said other people are like feeling, spiritual type of person. And you went from a world of pure like just feeling and experience. You're like a musician and it's creative in that way, and you're a deeply feeling person, and you went all the way to the other extreme, and you found yourself in a world where it's all about the mind and your actions. It was like learning Torah and doing mitzvahs, and that's what you're doing. And he said, so you're very far away from the essence of who you are. He said, it's the best thing that's ever happened to you. I said, why? He said, because it's not your natural state to be doing those things. And now you got this thing called Torah. You got access to this other part that you wouldn't have had naturally. Like it would be very natural for you to go down a path and love being involved in tefillah and prayer. Like that's like makes a lot of sense for you. But to go down this path and fall in love with it, like that's a big blessing. You have to appreciate that. He said, but now you've been involved with this for many years. He said, you have to turn around and find yourself.
Wow.
I was like, okay, how do I do that? Like, what does that look like? And he said, you need to look in the direction of Chassidus. It's like, that's what you should look into. And he's like, and specifically, you should learn Rabbi Nachman, which at the time, like in the kind of the spaces I was in, was not something that you did. It was like I was very much in a different space. And that started this like third chapter of like moving inward, really going deeply into the world of Chassidus, and seeing how that part of Torah really connects the philosophy with the psychology, with the spiritual side of what this was all about. And it's almost like I felt the light starting to open up again and moving back into that space, but now reintegrating, life before and life now with what was going on.
We'll be right back to this episode in just a second, but first, a word from our very, very special friends at Ornava. Ornava, the incredible organization Rabbi Zechariah Wallerstein started many years ago, Zatzal, Zecher Tzaddik Livracha. And they're having this campaign, June 5th to June 7th. Every single donation will be doubled. And the campaign is called Never Give Up on a Soul. That is what Rabbi Wallerstein was all about. He never gave up on anybody. His legacy lives on forever through the various different programs that Ornava runs, whether that's the ranch at Bethel, Benos Chava Academy, Ateres Nava Seminary, Benos Bina Seminary, the Shabbos of Inspiration they have, I know, in the Raleigh coming up, Tisha B'Av around the world, Avinu Malkeinu. These programs are changing lives in Klal Yisrael. And it's time that we recognize that and we remember all the work Rabbi Wallerstein put in and all the work that is continuously being done at Ornava. June 5th to June 7th, there is a campaign happening. And it's our time to say thank you. Every donation will be doubled. Make sure to head to charity.com/Ornava. That is charity.com/Ornava, June 5th to June 7th. So make sure you have your Meiser money ready and make sure you're able to make a donation to invest in the future of Klal Yisrael and invest in the legacy of Rabbi Zechariah Wallerstein. And of course, a word from my friends at Swing It. My swing set sitting in the backyard from Swing It. It is looking fine and it has undergone weather. We're talking storms, snowstorms, hailstorms, thunderstorms, lightning, everything. But the swing set's looking beautiful because it is high quality stuff. Well, now is that time of year where we're reaping the benefits of having a playscape from Swing It. Make sure you reach out to Swing It. Hit the link in the show notes in the description of this episode and get in touch with them today. They have a guaranteed 2 to 4 week delivery. So let's say you're going to the bungalow colony for the summer and you want a swing set there from Swing It. Order it today and it'll be there by the time you get there. How incredible is that? Make sure you call Swing It today. Send them a message on WhatsApp even. They are incredible. Their customer service is amazing. I remember I woke up at like 6 a.m. I'm like, what is going on in my backyard? Boom! My swing set's being built. And before I knew it was built, and my daughter was playing on the swing sets. And that's something that you can have by your home. Make sure to reach out to Swing It today. And Swing It's not just about having swing sets. They're making sure that this swing set in your backyard is looking fine. They just introduced this new black vinyl option. I'm telling you, your kids will love it and you will too, because it adds like a certain aesthetic. It adds a certain ambiance to your yard. And that's really only when you go through Swing It. So give them a call today.
Or you could like take me into that moment. Did you fear, like you're married at this point, right? Like you're building a bias them on like, did you fear that, oh no, I'm gonna relapse in my journey over here, like I'm gonna go back to some old ways? Was that a fear of yours, or was just like the unknown was happening?
Yeah, I didn't have a fear of falling back into like going to the past in some way.
Yeah.
Very forward thinking in how I look at life. It was more when you just know something's not okay, it's not right, like something isn't right. And you also know, I know that the problem isn't the Torah. The problem must be in me, because this thing is beautiful. This is speaking words of truth and messages that are life-changing, but I'm missing something. And I just didn't know what that was. And that was also expressing itself in my life. In my new book, The 3 Conditions, I'm a little bit more open about it, where I speak about the fact that like it was challenging. Like I found myself in places of anger at home, and I wasn't an angry person. And all of a sudden I found myself with bad midos, and I didn't know where it was coming from. And it was all happening at the same time. So there was a shift that needed to take place. There was something in the way that I was seeing things, the way that I was thinking about things. There was a problem somewhere in my belief system. And I didn't know what it was, but I knew that was it. So it wasn't a fear of like falling back, but it was like where the direction that I'm on needs an adjustment, something about what I'm doing, and not on the surface. It was something inside.
So the doctor prescribed a shot of Chassidus.
Yeah, as a good start. And it came alongside many things, but that was the beginning of turning inward and recognizing that life is really happening really on the inside. All the stuff on the surface is a lot of fun, and this is the stage for life. This is the stage where it's all happening, but our experience of life is all happening between here and here. That's where it all matters at the deepest level. And that was the beginning of that part of the journey.
I'm going to quibble with the terminology of
You're gonna what?
I know you were kidding.
You're gonna what?
I'm going to quibble with the terminology of a shot of Chassidus, because
Quibble.
those that learn Chassidus know that it opens up a whole nother dimension of Torah, of Yiddishkeit, and it informs every single step of Avodah, every single experience of learning the Torah, connecting to the Eibishter through the Torah, and it really opens up a whole nother realm that people don't otherwise experience within Yiddishkeit. And it's, as I hear you share that part of your story, it's such an insightful framework of giving you direction at that inflection point of your journey, where there's a whole nother dimension to open up.
Yeah, I'm so grateful that's what he said, and that's the direction that it took me in, because there wasn't anything else on the surface to change. The problem wasn't the what I was doing or the life I was living. It was something on the inside, and that's what Chassidus was helping open up for me in that way. And it really started a process of looking inward altogether. Subsequently, maybe like 3 or 4 years after that, like once I was swimming in it and it wasn't just a shot anymore, it was like that's all I drank. Not all I drank, but it was the overriding kind of like experience for me. I then started looking into other books in that world. I had never read books that I didn't read much in the band at all. Let's put it that way. Like when I was in the band, all I cared about was music and maybe video games and some sports. Like that was my life as a teenager. Then it was only Torah. Like that's it. I didn't want to put anything else in my brain. So from 20 to, 28, that was the only thing. I didn't read anything else. And at some point someone handed me a book and said, I think this will help you in your like kind of spiritual journey. And it was the first time I saw something outside the world of Torah. It was like more spiritual, psychological type of book. And it was putting language. Nothing in the book said anything that I hadn't already seen in the Baal Shem Tov or the Maharal or the Ramchal or the Gra or the Ari or the Zohar. It wasn't anything that I hadn't seen, but it was a language that was so, I don't know another word for it. It was modern. It was accessible. It was right here. I was like, Dad, that's what we're talking about. That's exactly it. But when you're talking about mochen de gadlus and mochen de katnos, that speaks very differently than an expanded consciousness and opening your mind, right, to certain things. So all of a sudden, I was being handed language to help translate so much of what's already there, which was both helpful for me, like in my own personal process, and then down the line became a language that I could help use to translate these ideas to a broader audience.
You know who does a masterful job of doing that? Just a shout out to Reb Chaim Miller.
Yeah.
Who adapts.
We interviewed him, yeah?
Yeah. He's prolific in what he authors within Teres Chabad.
Good, Nick.
But he takes...
I know Reb Miller.
He takes Chassidus, and as you're describing, he articulates it in contemporary terms in ways that we can relate to based on just the people that we are in 2024. But he doesn't claim to translate Tanya. He adapts Tanya to contemporary articulation. It's masterful.
Yeah, that's a good language, actually. It's adapting the same ideas. When I spoke to Rav Usher Weiss, who's a close Rebbe of mine, and I asked him, do I have creative license in my translation, right? Because I see the words over here. I know what it's speaking about. And if I translate it this way, someone might come and say, but that's not exactly what it says. It's like, says it like this. And he says...
With that body motion, by the way.
This is not...
Probably a little closer.
That is the most
a little closer to your
objection.
face.
It's like the posture of objection.
Yeah. And he looked at me and he said, you don't have permission to do that. You have an obligation to do that. He said, if you have the ability to take Torah and share it in such a way that it can help people and move them in that direction, he said, who are you to not do that? Like, go for it.
Do you feel that, I don't know, obviously you don't speak for all Baalei Tshuva. Imagine you've had encounters with many. Do you feel like that's a challenge, or that many Baalei Tshuva go through, where they're doing, let's say for you is rock band, only Torah for 8 years, and then it's like, oof, burnt out, not sure, where do I go? Is that a common challenge amongst Bali Tshuva?
You know, I don't want to speak for all Bali Tshuva.
But I'm asking you to.
Yes, yeah.
Little Nishtav Shabbos Garet over there.
Yeah. What? It's not Shabbos.
No, people say before they enter, any time they talk about
We're not
something
recording on Shabbos, Momo.
No, but you understand what I'm saying, right?
Yeah, I got
Because I'll explain it otherwise.
It's okay. It's okay.
I have seen people fall in love with the ideas of Torah and then not integrate properly. And then you end up in this space of almost like a disjointed version of the
being
whole
a scientist.
thing.
It's like knowing a lot of information, but
Yeah. So I've seen that. But I can't say that that's the majority. But I see it goes both ways. Meaning, like, some people come and like that's it,
Yeah.
and it really has to do with your orientation to life coming into it, right? So if you're the type of person who's okay with the process, like, it didn't bother me the fact that I was going through a hard time. I recognize life in life, you go through hard times, so you just go and you figure out how to fix it. What would be more challenging is when you see someone going through something, they don't realize that they're in the disjointed place, so they're living in pain, but they're afraid to make the shift, right? I think what a lot of Bali Tshuva go through, and this I can speak to because a lot of them share this with me, which is there's this fear of not being able to fit into this new society that they're now a part of, and so they push further than maybe they would normally push, or they do things that maybe they wouldn't normally do so that they can be a part of something. And I think when you grow up with Judaism as part of your life, if that's the way that you've been raised, so not to say that it's more normal for you, but you grew up in a world where it's like it's all there together, right? So you don't have to think about it so much.
take us down this path of the adaption, or the new obligation that you have been given to do. What did that look like?
Yeah, so I feel very called by this type of work, which is to help people live a more enlightened and empowered life. It speaks to every part of my nature. And on some level, it's really an adaptation of what I used to do, but now with Torah, meaning I used to put out albums and now I put out books. I used to go on stage and sing and now I go on stage and speak. So it's really very similar type of work, but like you mentioned before about going to a new dimension on the inside, it's just doing it from a different dimension. Somewhere along the way, I had this clarity. I'll tell you when it happened. It was the summer of 2019. I went back to LA for the first time to make amends with these band members. And
Which clearly didn't happen.
Yeah, it didn't happen. It was a really hard trip. And there were some really hard experiences on that trip. Didn't work out. Of course it did, but it didn't work out for me the way that my brain thought it should go. And when I got back from that trip, something inside of me opened up. There was like a real powerful opening that took place where there was this recognition that everyone, can hate you and you're still okay. Mm-hmm. Which means that you can do something that maybe the whole world doesn't understand, but it was still the right decision. And it's still good. Like when I left, that was definitely the right decision for me. And yet people are still mad at me for it. But it didn't change the decision. So I think somewhere in there, it was getting past fear, that maybe I had some fear around what my next steps were going to be. And that all came down. And during that space where I felt this almost very freeing, opening experience, I had this insight, a kind of like a download that we should be sharing this with the world. It wasn't the path that I was kind of groomed for, maybe in the kind of yeshiva track. I thought I was going to be maybe more of a magachir, a mashgiach, a rosh kol, something like that. That was where I was kind of setting up for. I didn't, just because I was doing the spiritual work didn't necessarily mean that that's what I was going to do. But after that experience of this real big opening, somewhere in there, I sat down. I was sitting in a shul somewhere, and I said a prayer to Hashem. I was like, I'm ready for whatever the right next step is. And within that hour, it was like, you need to share this with the world. The world needs this. So I was makabel. I completely took that in. A month later, I sat down and I wrote a book in a month. It was like just kind of came through. and I went to.
Welcome to Godless.
It was an.
How does
I was.
that happen? That never happened to me, by the way.
This was this.
Yes, I had like this really inspiring moment.
Has that ever happened to you, Nachi?
I sat down and wrote an essay. Not even an essay. How do you write a book in a month? How many pages?
Oh, I don't know. It's probably 250 pages. I don't know.
Okay, Harry Potter.
So,
Can I open a parentheses?
Yeah.
I just want to unpack 2 layers of the process leading up to that. One, sometimes when we know that we need to make an amends, developing that willingness to put oneself out there and to approach the other party and to attempt to make amends, that's very hard. But that's really all we could do.
That's it. It's your side of the street.
Yeah.
That's all you can do.
That's all you can do.
Whether it's
yeah.
received, it's really out of our control.
It's still hard, you know?
It is
Very hard.
It is hard. You have to like be willing to go do
being
that.
vulnerable also. It's like you're hoping that this will be like, even though it's all you can do, you're hoping that it will be accepted.
And the avodah is to know that trip was not a failure. That trip was you executing your willingness to make an amends.
That's exactly what it was. And when I sat down, there was one person who would sit down with me. It was one of the band members' mothers who I knocked on the door. I was trying to find, and I was very close with them. And we sat down together, and she really let me have it. It felt like the scar tissue was still like fresh.
Sounds like you let everyone down.
I did. I let everyone down, and people's
Like
lives
that was their
were-
ticket. You were their ticket,
Maybe
in theory.
in theory, like that.
Very deep.
Good plug.
I will high five you on that, Nachi.
And she told me, she looked at me, she said, "It's very nice that you want to come and make amends and say you're sorry, but it doesn't mean that people have to receive it." And she was very cold-minded about it when she said that, which is hard to hear. She's right. She was right, but all I could do is try. I did have to tell her I didn't come to say I'm sorry. Like, I'm not apologizing for leaving. The decision was right. I'm just sorry that people got hurt or felt hurt because I made a decision for myself, and making that very, very clear.
Do you have their numbers on your phone?
No.
The band people.
No,
Oh,
no. That'd be nice.
I was gonna ask you to call them.
Yeah.
That
Maybe
would've
one day.
been, that would've been
We tried.
been crazy, if they answered and they just like, it's funny. We had a guest, Mayor Weiss, who
Also, they're not listening to this interview right now, so they don't have that context.
You never know.
No, but meaning when you would call them, they wouldn't have been listening to it.
I know, but I feel like Z100 does it all the time. Like, hey,
Yeah.
you're on the air.
For the record, one of them I did recently connect with, which was again for the first time in nearly 20 years, and it was a solid, decent conversation, which was really nice. So that's a beginning. So it could be that it takes 20 years.
We had Mayor Weiss on this podcast, who he grew up not Jewish. He was, in public school. He was bagging groceries in a Jewish supermarket, whatever. It's a great episode. People can watch it. And we got an email a couple of weeks ago from Mercedes. I think her name was Mercedes. And it was a beautiful email. I really should read it, but I don't have it in front of me. Should I read it? Should I pull it up? I'll pull it up. Give me a second. Because it's so nice. And I want to kind of like, I want to say give you hope, because you're living your life and everything is great. But something like this can happen. And no, I can't find the email.
We could pause for 10 seconds, station identification.
Yo, can you find it?
I'm gonna do a deep meditation over here. Deep
Yes.
breath. Go in.
Yes.
Life is good. Everything happens at the right time. Maybe on that same point while you're looking,
Yeah.
it was the combination
They'll
of
edit
both.
out, by the way, the pause
Okay.
to find the email.
Or maybe we won't.
Okay.
Or maybe we won't.
Or maybe they won't.
Yeah. So I was just going to say that, I
Yeah,
guess,
go for it.
while you're looking, it had dawned on me and became very clear that I'm probably not the only person who was struggling with that piece of feeling far from life, far from self, far from Hashem, far from God, whatever that means, right, to people. And the ability to bring that and share that to people is everything. It's everything. The same way that you said that when you immerse yourself in Chassidus, it completely reorients the way that you look at life. There's a way to go through this world where I was talking to someone earlier right before this conversation about like anxiety and like fear of public speaking. There's a way to go through life where that can be transcended, right? You can get beyond that we can go from a place of fear to a place of love and enthusiasm. You can go from a place where you feel trapped by your mind or trapped by the way you look at life and experience a higher consciousness, a deeper way of going through this world. And when you do, it's not just that you're a little bit happier. It's the entire world is different. You're free. And I was once on a flight, and on the flight, I saw my Rebbe come on the plane, which to me was like, oh, I'm gonna get 10 hours. I'm gonna go grab it.
And he went into the cockpit.
No, he's much smarter than me. He saw me and he walked right over to me and he said, Moshe, it's so great to see you. He's like, we should book an hour together on the flight. Chachamein of Barosha. And he's like, okay, fine. And we went and we sat and we learned together for an hour. It was around this time. It was right before Pesach. And at the end of the hour, he said, is there anything you're working on or any questions I could answer for you? And someone had just asked me before I got on the flight. He said that, there's a Mishnah that says, Ein ben chorin ela misha osek b'Torah. You're only free if you're involved with Torah. And he said, you don't look all that free. You guys are all busy all the time. He's like, you got to get up at a certain time in the morning. You have all these things you have to do. There's all these food restrictions. You're not free. Like, what do you mean you're free if you're involved in Torah? So I asked him this question and he looked at me and he said, people think freedom means the freedom to do whatever you want. He says, freedom means the ability to be who you are. And he said, the purpose of Torah is to help you be, right? It's getting to a certain place. Like, that's the goal. The goal is the state of being. That's what freedom is.
The goal is soul.
Huh?
The goal is soul.
The goal is soul.
Dr. Benji Epstein. That's his...
Right. Your soul purpose is your soul purpose. SOLE is your SOUL.
I love that.
Yeah.
We'll be right back to this episode, but first, a quick word from my friends at Town Appliance. Yes, Town Appliance. Shavuos is coming up, and you want to make sure that your appliances are working at full order. Or maybe you're ready to make a new purchase. Maybe you are doing a new construction. Well, it doesn't matter what it is. If you need an appliance, Town Appliance is there for you. You're going to head to townappliance.com. That is townappliance.com, and make sure you get in touch with them today. You can send them a message on WhatsApp, and they will take care of whatever it is you need. That is townappliance.com. New oven, new dishwasher, new outdoor setup, whatever it is, Town Appliance has got you covered. Reach out to them today. Tell them, hey, heard about you on Meaningful People podcast like a bajillion times. And I think it's time I reached out because you know what? It's time I upgrade my fridge. It's time I upgrade my freezer. Summer's coming up. I need another freezer. I got my kids coming over every single Shabbos in the Yontif. And for some reason, I'm talking in a Texas accent right now because that's what Town Appliance does. Because when you're in love, you do crazy things. And I'm in love with townappliance.com. Of course, a big thank you to our friends at Rothenberg Law Firm. There for the Jewish community. There for really every community. Injurylawyer.com is there for you. I was actually doing a live podcast this week in Florida. Some of you may know if you follow us on our status. And I just all of a sudden found myself talking about injurylawyer.com. It's interesting because they're the best. They're the best in the business. Injurylawyer.com. They have lawyers that are not just professional lawyers, but they're confidants. They become someone who understands your case, understands what's best for you in this scenario. So if you're ever in an accident, there's maybe negligence, there's a case that you want to be evaluated, head to injurylawyer.com and get your free case evaluation today. That is injurylawyer.com, the most trusted law firm in the world, and that is injurylawyer.com.
I want to read this email from Anthony Mercedes. It's the subject sent us was Finding Mayor Weiss. It says, hello, my name is Anthony Mercedes. I stumbled upon the interview you had with Mayor Weiss, formerly known as Nelson. I went to high school with Mayor Weiss. I saw his conversion to Judaism firsthand, and I'm happy to see he's in good health and has found his purpose in life. Myself, much like Lamar and everyone else in our friend group, have lost touch with him, and I've always wondered how he was doing. I'm reaching out to ask if you can give Mayor my email and let him know that his friends miss him. Let him know that Anthony, Lamar, and Andrew miss him, and we hope that one day we can get in touch. Best, Anthony. So we reached out to Mayor Weiss, and we, of course, asked him for permission if we can share his email address. He said, please. And Nissan followed up with Mayor. He said, did you guys end up getting in touch? He said, yes. We're going out for dinner.
Gewalt.
Amazing.
And,
I love that.
And that's a beautiful thing. So you said maybe they're probably not going to see this podcast, right? But maybe they will.
You never know.
And maybe they'll reach out, just like Anthony Mercedes, which I don't know how they saw the podcast. Showing our podcast and I don't know where, but it's awesome. I feel like that's a lot of what you talk about also. It's like the world is like this place and things just happen and it's like nitzotzos, right? It's like
everything is so perfect. You can't even imagine. We can't begin to fathom how everything has to fall so perfectly, and it does. You know, on the flight on the way here, I mentioned this a little bit of the story the other day on a different podcast, but I'll give you the kind of the more full version of it, which is just,
podcast.
This Gary Vaynerchuk podcast.
Okay, just make sure.
Yeah, that one. Good one. So I'm on the flight, and this guy comes down and sits next to me, and he's a very chatty guy, nice guy, really good guy, 26, 27-year-old individual. And he's talking to me about life and about this and about that and why he was in Israel and his trip over there and what he does for a living. And then we got really deep, really fast, and we're speaking about like happiness and, you know, purpose. And after about a half an hour, he puts out his hand and says, okay, well, it's nice to meet you. And I said, okay, yeah, my name's Moshe, by the way. And he says, oh, I'm Max. And he said, Moshe what? And I said, Moshe Gersht. And he goes, the Moshe Gersht? I was like, I don't know. Is there another way? I don't know. And he goes, I love your book. He's like, it's had such an impact on me. I can't believe it. I'm sitting next to you. Just last night, I'm with my family in Israel, and we were looking at the 3 conditions, your new book, and we're just talking about it. They're not going to believe it. We're sitting here.
He didn't recognize you?
I guess not. My picture's not. It was only on one of the books.
Oh.
And so he goes, I have so many questions for you.
Oh, gosh. So you looked at me and you said,
You're like, yeah, we should book an hour.
Yes.
Totally book an hour.
And we went and just...
And we're 26 minutes into that hour.
We had 3 hours almost, like somewhere between 2.5 and 3 hours of conversation. He's just like, okay, I've got this question and this question.
Good for
He
you.
had like,
You're kind.
like
You're kind.
a list of like all the things he wants to speak about. Love this guy. He was amazing. So after that, he puts his headphones on. He's like, I'm going to let you have your flight now. The guy sitting in the seat in front of him, so if I'm in the middle, the seat over there, he leans his chair back, and nice Chassidus guy, you know, long payas. He's got sits on the outside, and he says, so I've been listening to you guys for the last 2.5 hours.
Involved.
He said, that was the most inspiring conversation I've ever heard.
Wow.
He said, how do I find out more? He's like, you have all these things to say. Like, so I had a copy of my book, and I said, here, like, I have an extra copy with me. You can have the book. This guy sits there and spends the next 4 hours learning the book. He finishes the entire thing cover to cover,
Wow.
right? He then leans his chair back and says, I have so many questions for you. And we go for another hour and a half.
That's
Very
amazing.
good. Very
And
good.
at that moment, I realized, because these guys were like coming from totally different worlds, right?
Yeah.
One was nowhere near being born and raised in, you know, Babov, which is, I think this guy was a Babov Chassid. And then you have this Babov Chassid, and they're sitting there with the same questions.
Wow.
Because we are going through this human experience trying to figure this thing out. We're trying to live connected. We're trying to live alive and aligned and plugged in. So it doesn't matter where you're from and how you were raised and what you're doing. There are like these universal pathways to bring you back into the light, right? The name of the book is It's All the Same to Me, because there's a sameness, right, that we all share. And it's this or Ein Sof, this light that permeates all of reality. And we're all trying to touch that thing. We're all trying to get into that place. It just felt like you couldn't orchestrate this. And that's to your point of like perfect synchronicity. Like, you can't make that up. That this guy's sitting there having the conversation, and this guy literally needs to hear it. And it's just amazing. You go through life and you just say thank you.
And that is life. Like, that is it's amazing. You take me to, like, I guess leading up to, you did a TED Talk.
Can I stay on that for 1 second?
Sure.
On that book that you just referenced.
It's all the same?
Yeah. I started reading that book, loving it.
Thank you.
I want to invite you to articulate the concept of equanimity, of shivisi, the sameness that you're talking about, because I think it's an aspect of Chassidus, but it's a really good opportunity to do that adaptation that we talked about before on a concept that's been in the Svarim Akdoshim for centuries, but you're giving it a contemporary nusach. And I want to just invite you to elaborate on what is equanimity.
Sure, thank you. So the word that the Baal Shem Tov uses is hishtavus, from the word shaveh, like you mentioned, shivisi Hashem lenegdi samid, which means I place God before me always. But the Baal Shem Tov and others point out that if you want to say that I put God in front of me, you should say samti. That's how you would say it in Hebrew. Shivisi is it's a strange language to use over there. And so that word comes from the language of shaveh, which means the same or equal. That life, you put God before you always when you live with this thing called equanimity, this kind of state of sameness, or that all is equal in your eyes. What does that mean, and what does that look like? So it's the inner peace that's born from not judging reality. We go through life with all sorts of thoughts about how things are supposed to be. It should be like this. It should be like that. This is good. This is bad. And we're constantly judging how life is. Equanimity is a state that happens when you go into a place of non-judgment. Instead of me having to put my own opinion on everything that takes place, what if I just receive it as it is, right? You surrender your own ego to life. You let life happen for you, to you, paying attention. And so when you're feeling good about what's taking place, you're allowing that to happen. When you're feeling bad about something, you're allowing that to happen. When something shows up, you're in this place of allowing and surrender. And when you're there, it's a different reality. And the Baal Shem Tov says that this is like the highest of all the midos. Why? Because if you're there, that freedom, you're not resisting life anymore. This non-resistance to life. So what happens if there's nothing to fight anymore? You just feel peace. I'm not in a fight with life. Not in a fight with anything, with anyone. I'm allowing things to be as they are. And it doesn't mean I don't take action, right? I can still take action if something needs to change. I'm very present with things as they show up.
How does that work though? Because by nature, I feel like we're very reactive people. Something, if let's say you get hurt by something, ow, that hurts. Instead of, I'm just gonna, that is uncomfortable, but I'm going to just go above it and beyond it.
Yeah.
How do you work? How does it work?
Right.
It sounds beautiful to me.
It is. It's really quite beautiful. So let's say you're with someone and they make a comment that's like really not nice.
Yeah.
And that happens, right? Especially if you're involved in social media at all, everyone's got a lot of things to say,
Yeah.
right? And they're putting it on your wall. So if a what you might call normal reaction to that is, gosh, this guy's such a jerk. Like how could he say something like that? And then what ends up happening is you then end up going home and telling your wife, or if you're not married, you tell your friend, and that becomes a conversation, and it lives inside of you, like starts to take over. And if it was really bad, then it fires up all the negativity in you, and now they're living rent free in your head and your heart. Hishtavos, that this non-judgment would allow yourself to feel the pain, because no one starts at the end, right? You start where there is pain, but instead of reacting back, you see it and you say, that's painful. And you see them, and instead of judging them as good or bad in that case, you would say, wow, that's what they did. Okay, I accept the fact that they're allowed to have their opinion. It's not my opinion, but they're allowed to have their opinion, and you let it go. To do that,
letting it go, right?
That's the point.
Mechanism.
Is the letting go.
You also
the
said,
action item.
But you also said that doesn't mean there's no action taken, right? Now, if somebody is
if it's painful, it's like if someone is stepping on your foot, even if you don't get mad at them,
you would
still remove them from your foot or you from them, right? If there's someone who's, spamming your social media feed with all sorts of negativity, so you don't have to get mad at them. When I see negativity on my feed or like in my comments, it's like, I feel bad for them. This morning I was driving here and I guess I didn't go fast enough through the light or didn't on the tour, and the guy behind me is honking and I see him erratic in his car, yelling and all like upset.
It may have been
Is that you, Navi?
It may have been me. Was that, were you? Oh no.
And my feeling inside is, poor guy.
Poor him.
Poor guy.
Terrible.
Like that's so hard to be in a place where that's your reaction. So you can feel forgiveness and love and compassion for someone, even if they're throwing stones at you, because people are doing the best that they can. A lot of the orientation to get into a place of Hishtavos is remembering that no one's getting life wrong on purpose, right? We have this we live in fear of people trying to hurt us or things not going well. So because we've got this underlying fear, we project those fears out into the world. But we have to remember, everyone's walking around like that. Everyone's doing the best they can with the skills that they've been given, with the consciousness that they have, with how far they've grown in their own life. And so the non-judgment allows you to let them do what they're doing without, getting reactive. I'll give you another example. I was sitting once in a certain yeshiva, and there was a certain group of people that every time I had my feet in front of me, this particular sect of individuals would walk and step on my toes. They would just walk on my feet, and they didn't even look at me when it happened. Like my feet were out in front of like my stender, and they'd come and they'd walk right by and they'd step on my feet exactly like that. And every time, yeah, exactly. And it's, look, I'm still smiling.
Just testing theory.
Right. Thank you, Hashem. And it was like a couple weeks, and I saw myself like at some point, I was, stop stepping on my feet. And the way that I was able to get around it and allow them to do whatever they were doing was I realized that this particular group of individuals grew up in the type of community where everything was very small and compact. And so it was normal to step on someone's foot, which means I'm not aware that I'm even doing that to someone else, which means as far as they're concerned, they're like how I would look at like a 4-year-old. Right? If a 4-year-old stepped on my foot, would I get upset? No, because they don't have that awareness. Right? So they're no different. And finding that allowing and forgiveness allowed me to kind of be there and let that happen. And the best part is, after I had that shift, it never happened again.
Yeah.
It was happening for weeks. And a lot of life is about just making the shift, and then the thing on the surface stops. The Baal Shem Tov says explicitly, when you make the shift on the inside, things change on the outside.
Wow. I would imagine, though, that being in that state of serenity, of hishtavos, where you respond in the moment with that letting go, with that surrender, as opposed to getting agitated. I imagine it's hard to do that work in the moment of reaction, but maybe there's like a practice to proactively develop that muscle of equanimity.
Yeah, the first step in this work is actually just becoming aware that it's happening. I think most people are going through life completely unaware of their inner world. So they don't even notice that they're having the reactive thought, and they don't even notice that they're having the emotion. They're just responding. They're like literally just saying the words, hey, don't do that. Right? They're like straight to the beginning
What
of
about internally?
this.
Like, we're mentioning a lot of examples that are someone's doing something to you, but what about you're doing something to yourself?
Oh, this is great. So let's say you went somewhere and you met someone and you ended up saying something that hurt them, and now you're beating yourself up afterwards, right? Because you're like, man, I can't believe I said that. That was such a mistake. Yeah, bless you.
It was a cough. It was a cough. It was a cough.
God should still bless you
for your cough as well.
Thank you.
So we beat ourselves up so much in our own minds, right? We go through life and we're like, I can't believe I did this, or I'm so dumb, or what was I thinking? And we have all these thoughts. And that's no different than someone on the outside yelling at you. And so when you can see that and just notice, like that's the beginning, that as far as a practice is concerned, when you start to notice that your mind, and even if your mind is running too fast, you can even just notice your emotions. Like you see, it's like, wow, I'm feeling tense, I'm feeling pressure, I'm feeling anger, or your mind is saying all these things. You start to notice it. You realize that your mind is a mind of its own, right? And it's something that you have. It's not something that you are, because you must be different from your mind because you can see it. If you can see it, that means you're not it. So when you start to cultivate a sense of awareness to what's happening inside of you, that already, the Piazetzna says, that's the beginning of the separation from being lost in it, right? From being so identified with the thought that you can't see it anymore. That already begins to soften the blow. The more you do that, to your question, you start getting really good at catching things in the moment. Like as they're happening, it comes up, you see it, and then you just kind of let it roll over you like a wave. Like you're there, like just right, like I felt that thought, or I had that feeling, and like you stay grounded in the center, and that center, it's what we call das, right? It's like yeshuva das, menuchas nefesh. You stay in that space. There's a Gemara, for me, this is maybe one of the most beautiful pieces of Torah. I think about it all the time. It says, da kanisa machasarta. If you have awareness, what do you lack? If you lack awareness, what do you have? That's like everything. That's like
Perke Kinyan Das.
Perke Kinyan Das. Yeah, that's everything.
Wow.
If you have this thing, if you can develop this awareness, you have it all. If you lack this awareness, even if you have things, you're living in scarcity. You're living in lack.
Friend of mine, Yaakov Weiser, Heilige Yid in North Woodmere, Jake Weiser, he told me, I think it's his Chiddush, we say at the end of Shemon Esrei and Elikai Netzar, we ask Hashem to protect us from everyone that has plots and bad thoughts about us. And he said, sometimes we fail to realize that those thoughts are our own, about ourselves.
Love that. Beautiful.
Can you tell me a little bit about leading up to the TED Talk that you did and what it was like doing something like that? Of course, it's been viewed by millions of people, and just like that parsha. Tell me about that. It's pretty cool.
That was a lot of fun. It was a little bit nerve-wracking in the beginning. What had happened was the book came out. It's All the Same to Me came out. It did really well, and I think because of the endorsements it got and because of the bestseller status, it attracted other things along the way. So there was an individual, Steve Monahan, who's a wonderful person. He had read the book and he'd reached out to me through LinkedIn and asked me if I wanted to be a part of their TED Talk that they were having in Atlanta. And to me, it's like, yeah, that sounds good. Let's go share. And I think it was the first time, probably since I was in the band, that I felt, oh, this might be seen by like a lot of people. At that point, I had a small social media thing. Like I had a little bit of Instagram and Facebook, and I was putting out some ideas, but I wasn't really doing anything there in a meaningful way.
Very deep.
Meaningful.
Yeah, I got
it.
it.
Good. And so now this opportunity was like, this could be seen by lots of people. So I felt at that moment I did regress. I felt it, and I even told this to my wife. I feel like I went back like 2 or 3 steps to a place where I was nervous about what people would think. Partially because I wanted to, share the ideas in a right way, and 20 minutes is a short amount of time, and I think you only get 18 minutes to speak. And the other part was because
After that becomes chametz.
It's Pesach season. I expect
love
nothing
it.
less.
Top of mind.
That's right.
Absolutely.
The other thing was they actually sent like a whole list of things that you can and can't talk about at the talk. And if you talk about it,
Chametz is one of them.
we won't like keep it up. Like we won't put it up.
I would be so like, I
I love how they give you their enforcement mechanism.
Right.
Because if you do, it's not going up.
Right.
I feel like I would just say the things that I would like. Give me a list of don't say these words. Be like,
Right. Well, no, and there was, and one of them was like God.
no,
And I mean,
can't say the word
from a religious context, because they don't want their platform to be used like in a proselytizing way, which makes sense to me. I can understand.
they don't want
that.
people coming and preaching.
They don't,
Keep
they
it
don't want it to
neutral.
be preaching. So like obviously you can use the word God, but if you're speaking about spiritual religious context, I'm like coming up there as someone. I wanted to make sure that what I was going to do could be received by everyone.
Could you say
and so-
Hashem?
Maybe, probably.
It's like taboo, like the words that you
The
can't
words,
say,
yeah.
like synonym it.
And there was a couple coaches like in their sphere that also like really made, like they were like, I've seen it happen to people. I've seen their videos go up and taken down. So like take this seriously. So as soon as that came in my mind, I was like, oh no, like I'm investing all this time and energy into this talk, and I'm investing money into this talk and flying around the world to make this happen. Like it better
Yeah.
go. So that those nerves kind of sat with me leaning into it, which is I think more than I'd experienced in like any other version of that in my life. But then the talk happened. It was great. Got there. They were wonderful. TED is an amazing organization. What they're doing is beautiful. They're basically an organization that's trying to make people more wise. I think that's awesome. The ability to be involved with that is amazing. But I basically blacked out when I got on the stage. Like I was so nervous.
It's like out of body.
Like out of body.
Did you freeze or
I've never watched it.
no way?
Yeah, subsequently.
Here
I
he
know
goes. Now he's going to put it up on the screen.
You have the remote? No, you don't want to watch it now?
You have 20 minutes.
18.
I would
Yeah,
just
that's
see the
true.
first 3 seconds where you said you blacked
Well,
out.
I've seen clips from it. But
did you
one day.
freeze like when you got on stage?
No.
You
I
just
think,
got-
I
you
think
just
the
went.
talk went well. I mean,
Had
it's
you
been seen a lot.
memorized it, or there was like a teleprompter?
I think part of why I was
That was a very
nervous.
granular question. That was like curiosity.
There was no teleprompter.
That's what podcast. Like we're here to ask
Yeah.
some granular questions.
There was no prompter. There was none of that. You're supposed to have ideally you're supposed to have memorized it like months in advance. Like you're really supposed to be knowing the material, but for reasons that I'm not going to share on air, the talk kept changing. It kept changing. I think there were 26 iterations by the time we got to the end, and the day before the talk,
Okay.
Nice.
yeah. The day before the talk, I still didn't have the talk. It wasn't like it
Well,
was.
they don't make you like submit it.
You do have to submit it, but I was still changing it
Nice.
for some back end reasons, and they had me go up to do like the rehearsal the day before, and when I got up to do the rehearsal, I still didn't have the talk. I still didn't know what I was going to say. I had like general ideas, but it wasn't crystal clear
Testing
to me.
1, 2,
And it
3,
was
1, 2, 3.
it was so much. I used every tool in my toolbox, every spiritual tool that I had to make it through that particular talk, because it was so heavy to me. The fear of like, what if I get up on a TED stage and I have nothing to say? What if nothing comes out? Like that's scary.
Yeah.
And I woke up the morning of the talk and I was sick, literally sick to my stomach. I felt nauseous. I had a pounding headache. I had probably taken, I don't know how many versions of Tylenol, Advil, whatever it was, like just leading up to the talk. And I was only supposed to speak at like 10 a.m., 10:30. It was early in the morning, but I was up at 5. I had to drive down from far. And
I'm nervous just listening to this. My stomach's hurting. Like, I was like, it's so nerve-wracking.
yeah, but I kept coming back to these practices, which allowed me to make it through it, despite the fact that it was a challenge. And I kept asking myself, like, how is it possible? Like, didn't I go through this enlightenment stage? And that was one of those moments where you realize enlightenment isn't like a degree you put on your wall. It's an ongoing process of growth, and you don't ever get to the end, and you have to always move back in. It's like you have tools, you have ideas, you go back into the learning, you go back into the teaching, you go back into the meditation, you continue to lean into all the things that you know. And you go through something like that. For me, that was it felt like Yerida L'Tzorech Aliyah. Like I went down there and I learned so much about myself in the process. I would, like, people ask, would you do it again? It's like 10 out of 10. I would do it again. It was one of the more painful processes emotionally for me, but I learned so much about myself and about the process. It was well worth it. And then in the end, it has reached many, many people, and people don't know what I was going through leading into it. And what I said, I hope is still meaningful to people as they were listening to it. So I felt really good. So that's my TED Talk experience.
It's pretty dope. What has been going on in your life since then?
So after the talk, I had signed with a literary agent. The first book was a self-published. Afterwards, there was an agency that was interested in the work that I was doing, so we signed with them, and we got a book deal with Sounds True, which they're the #1 spiritual publishing house in the world. Like, amazing.
Sounds true.
Sounds true. Yeah.
Well
It's like-
played. Well played.
And they are amazing. They've just been so good. It was so wonderful to work with them on this book. And so we spent about a year going through the process back and forth, the editing, all the pieces. And the book was scheduled to come out on November 7th, just this last year, which of course happened 1 month after October 7th. And I almost canceled like my whole book tour, my whole everything, because what do you do? Like,
Yeah.
on all of my advertising and marketing for the new book was scheduled to greenlight on October 8th.
Wow.
Like, it was after Simchas Torah. Like that's when we were going to start promoting, the pre-order on
Sure.
the book, and everything was turned off. Right, you have to just turn off all the emails. One email got out, and it felt so insensitive. Right, we had to pull everything down because the world stopped. Like, everything stopped, and it took 2 weeks before I had to make the decision if I was going to go on this book tour or not, which was 5 weeks around like all of America. We had all these wonderful events set up with Rabbi Moshe Friedman and Gedalia Fenster and a couple other really great speakers, Rabbi Ephraim Goldberg. It was like a really wonderful tour that was set up. And 2 weeks later, I called up both Rabbi Gershenfeld and Rav Asher Weiss to speak to them about, like, do I go do this book? Like, how do you do a book tour? How do you go speak about a book on happiness at a time when the world felt really dark, and it's, the sun hasn't fully come out yet, right? We're still in this interesting period of time. And both of them had the same reaction. Like, your whole life and your whole mission is dedicated to bringing light in the world, and it's a dark time, and that's it. So long as your wife and kids feel good and comfortable with you leaving Eretz Yisrael for 5 weeks in November of 2023, then go. And so I did. I went, and it was so beautiful and so powerful. It was real chizuk. We didn't speak so much about the book, really just sitting with people and speaking about what was going on, which is really what we're doing here. It's like trying to process life as it's happening, trying to stay connected to the depth of reality while the surface is very stormy. Like, life can be stormy on the surface, but you can still have the depth of the ocean inside of you while it's happening. So the tour was beautiful. The book did come out. Really, really excited about it. The book is called The 3 Conditions: How Intention, Joy, and Certainty will supercharge your life. And it's just
intention, joy, and certainty.
Yeah. It's based on Mishnah Berurah that speaks about what you're supposed to be thinking about while you're doing the Simanim on Rosh Hashanah.
Mishnah Berurah. Not expecting that.
Yeah, like that's not exactly
Schmuck.
Yeah. So there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds true. So
Very good.
It says while you're doing
sure.
these the simanim, so you're sitting there and Jews are funny, right? Jews are funny,
Hysterical.
Yeah.
Jerry Seinfeld, Larry David, Mo Bauman.
Bronius.
So the very first thing we do in the year is we make word plays on food. That's like that's the opening to the year.
Yeah, like here's a fish head.
Right, let's talk about it. Let's make a joke. Right, like, and it's really interesting. That's like a funny thing to do, and there's so much power in what that is. Rav Moshe Shapiro Zatzal would say that it's the power of our minds and our words that shift reality. And the very first thing you want to do is show that anything that shows up in front of you, we're going to play with it. We're going to change the way we look at it to make it a blessing in our lives. That's what we're doing. We're trying to like bring flow and goodness into our life, and that's what we're doing. But the Mishnah Berurah says there are three things you have to be doing while that's happening. He says there's something called hirhure tshuva, which is tshuva is to reconnect to yourself. He said you have to have bitachon, which is to be certain that you're going to have a good year, and it has to be besimcha. And to me, that comes out as an intention, certainty, and joy. Right? That's what we're working on while you're trying to supercharge your life. So the subtitle is pointing back to this idea, which is we do it in the beginning of the year, but that's all the time. That's always true. If you want to live life at a deeper level, at a higher level, with more joy and more love and more peace and more enthusiasm and creativity, it starts with those two things. Do you know who you are? Are you connected to the truth of who you are? And are you connected to the truth of what life is? Like, are you connected to the goodness of reality? And when those two things are in sync, so you naturally feel the joy of life. You feel the simcha. So the joy becomes the measuring stick. It's the barometer. You can ask yourself, like, if I'm not feeling good right now, good could sound like, it could be happiness, it could be peace, it could be whatever word you use for feeling good. If I'm not feeling good, you can just know, am I not believing in myself right now, or am I not believing in a good world right now? That's it. You can just narrow all of life down to those two paths, and then you can start to course correct. So that's what we're working on.
Gewalt.
That's fascinating. Well, we thank you for coming here and telling us your story. It's remarkable, and it never gets old. We hear a lot of journeys and stories that start out, whether it be directing HBO or being in Hollywood and being in a rock band, and then your whole life just everything's perfect, like you said.
Yeah.
Everything works out. Is there any one message you'd want to impart on the audience? Anything specific that's on your mind?
Yeah. It's for you. The life is for you. The very first thing that Hashem told Avram is Lech Lecha. To you, for you, to you, for you. And if you're not awake to that, if you're not thinking about that, you could be missing the biggest gift. This whole thing is for you.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the podcast. Again, remember, you want a free book. The first 1,000 people can get a free book from Rabbi Gersht. Make sure to hit the link in the show notes of this episode and get that done. Did you have an amazing time listening to this? Did you? I had an amazing time recording it. Well, guess what? In the future, if you want to ask a question on our podcast, send us a message at speakpipe.com/meaningful minute. That is speakpipe.com/meaningful minute. It could be a general question for our guests. It could be a general question for myself or Momo. We're happy to answer it. We love hearing from you. We love reading the reviews that you leave. I go through them every single week on Apple. So please leave a 5-star rating. Leave a review. I will read it, and I will gain enjoyment from reading your review. Your comments, your emails mean the world to me. Thank you. Can't wait to be giving you another episode next week, or actually in middle of the week. What? A midweek episode of Meaningful People? Yeah, that might be coming. So hit that subscribe button, hit that bell, because you want to know as soon as that becomes available. We'll see you very soon. Have a great week.